doing life together, right, in twos. And that's what we're going to talk about today, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But thank you to Leslie, thank you to Ashley for doing that video. It takes a lot of courage. And like Amanda said, today at the end of service, we're going to have our group leaders out at the table to introduce themselves to you. We have 4 groups I'll talk about later, a way to get connected into Blue Bridge. My favorite part about their story was how it started. It started with them working together just as coworkers. And then through relationship, there was an invite, not the church, but to their small group. We have a women's group. That's the group they're talking about. And then through that, Ashley came to Blue Bridge, and now she's on the worship team. So it's a great, incredible story that I hope to keep duplicating here. But before I get too far ahead of myself, I'm going to ask you guys to grab your programs one more time. And inside your program, you're going to find something that we call our Connect card, which Amanda talked about. Now, on this Connect card, on the back, there's a bunch of boxes and some lines. If you could do me a huge favor, and on the one of those lines, I want you to write a word for me. I want you to write the word overcome. So go ahead and write the word overcome, and then we'll come back to that on how we want to, what we want to do with that later. So before I get into today's message, let me tell you a story about a vacation that I went on. Okay? So a couple years ago, my wife and I, we went to Lake Chelan. We loved Lake Chelan. It's where we reconnected. It's where we got engaged. It's where we went on our honeymoon. And I would go there on our anniversary. We spend a whole week there every year. And so it's a very, very special place to us. The change in this trip was we had a 1-year-old now. And if anyone has ever had a 1-year-old, you know how much work they are. And then the drive can be very interesting, to say the least, right? Okay, there's a lot of entertaining going on that doesn't happen because they're in a car seat and they're miserable for 3 hours. It's a lot of fun. Try it out. So anyways, so here we are driving to Lake Chelan. She's starting to get a little antsy towards the end of the trip. And the cool part about going to Lake Chelan for us is I have what I call kind of an adopted grandma. Her name is Katie. I met her years ago through playing baseball. She was a host family of mine that I got to stay with, and we're still friends to this day. And she has a cabin right on Lake Chelan that she lets us use every year. And we were so excited because it saves you a lot of money when you have the space covered. And so when we show up to this cabin, right away I noticed something off. I noticed that there's kids out front playing, and there's this family kind of around their cabin. Like, that's weird. Why would people be using her, like, patio and such? And then I go to unlock the door. Well, it's already unlocked. And me and Courtney walk in with Vale, who had a poopy diaper and was not happy. I see stuff all over this cabin. And it's a smaller cabin for, like, a family of, 3, basically. And I realize I think Katie double booked the cabin this weekend. And so I'm looking at this dad who doesn't know who I am. I don't know who he is. And had this strange kind of, stare down of like, why are you in my house? There's kids around. Do I need to attack? And I hope he wouldn't because he's bigger than me, and I would have ran. But that's a different story for a different day. So turns out that's exactly what happened, is Katie double booked the cabin. So here we are with a 1-year-old who's hungry. She's poopy. She's grouchy. Here's my wife looking at me like, what did you do? So now I'm like, dang it. And so then we get on the phone because we're like, man, we drove all the way here. Let's find a place to stay. Well, what we didn't realize was we came to Chelan on one of the busiest weekends the whole summer. They had this huge triathlon every summer there, and every place is sold out. You can't find a place. You're lucky to find a place in Wenatchee, like a half hour away. And so we start calling around. We start stopping at different hotels. Nothing is open. So now me being the good husband, I get really impatient, and I'm just like, let's go home. And my wife's like, what are you talking about? We just drove 3 hours. We're not going home. Well, luckily for us, we found some hope. We got a hold of one Best Western hotel down somewhere in Chelan, and they had one room left that just got canceled, or we wouldn't have had a room. And so right away, we booked it. And there was a little bit of hope in a moment of hopelessness, right? Well, then we finally get settled in, and the story just keeps going. If you've seen a Chevy Chase movie like Christmas Vacation, this is what was happening. With some words. So here we are. Now we're getting settled in. We need food, right? Because we're going to go to Walmart. We get Val back in the car, which she's really excited about, right? Every kid wants to get back in the car to drive 20 more minutes to go shopping. Perfect trip. So we get her in the car. We're driving to Walmart. We get to Walmart, and she's like, hey, grab your wallet. Let's head inside. And I'm like, I don't have my wallet. And so we drive back to the hotel to look for my wallet. We can't find my wallet. And we're like, this isn't good, because my wallet was also my phone. It was one of those little foldovers, right? And so here I am, can't find my wallet, don't have my phone. We're looking in the car and all the cracks. And then I realized, when I put Vel in the car, I remember putting my phone on top of the car. And I was like, and then I remember also driving. I remember I saw something shiny in the rear of my mirror when we were driving. I thought that was weird because it looked like something had hit the road. I just remembered it. And so we drive back to that spot that I think I saw something. And sure enough, there's my phone, but it's in like 9 pieces. Can't find my cards because they hit the ground and scattered, and we were right next to the highway, so I think they went into the water. So here we are on this. So this trip's it's just awesome, right? I'm in the best mood. It was just this really exciting time that, like I said, it was just a very hopeful scenario, right? Long story short, we ended up having a good weekend. But that story kind of reminds me of life. It's a roller coaster, right? We have seasons in our lives where we're filled with hope, where things just seem to always be going right for us. And then there's seasons that there's not much hope. I would say it's almost hopeless, where things just don't seem to go our way. And so when I think of things going my way, here's some things that I think of. I think of, man, I finally got that promotion. I finally got that raise. Or we just got approved for that new house loan, so now we can go upgrade our house. Or my student loans are paid off. Kids are making good choices in school, so the principal hasn't called in a week. This is awesome. That'll be Vel someday, hopefully. Or vacation is right around the corner. We all know the week of vacation, when you know it's coming. It's the best week of work because you know you have something to look forward to. But then I start thinking about things. What about the season when I feel hopeless? What about those seasons? What about when it just seems like you and your spouse can never get on the same page? Or when that promotion or raise that I talked about, it doesn't happen. The guy that comes late every day, or the guy that is just can't stand, or that gal, she gets the raise or he gets the promotion. Or how about this? Bills just begin to add up in our lives, and finances begin to stress us and weigh us down because we don't know how we're going to make that payment. Or that nagging injury that just doesn't seem to go away, whether it was a car accident or just an accident in general where it's either your back or your foot or whatever it could be. Things just don't seem, you can't catch a break. So here's the thing about hopelessness. When we become hopeless, we begin to search for an answer to whatever's going on, right? We go into a mindset of, I have to solve this hopelessness. And so you begin to look into things. So some of us do things like we turn to things that we shouldn't. We try to chase a title or a position. We think if I get that position or that title, man, I'm going to be fine. Or we spend too much time in bars or wherever it may be because we're searching for something. Or we're trying to look for a new image. So I'm going to change my image because that's going to fill me up. That'll help me feel less hopeless with where I'm at in my life. Or the worst one, which we see on the news now all the time, is you look for a way out. Suicide rates off the charts now and growing. Scariest one. So whether it was by choice or whether it was just a life tragedy, hopelessness, here's what I want us to catch today. You choiced yourself into it, if you did, right? But you can choice your way out. And that leads me into today, why we're here. Why are we here? What is Easter all about? Easter is all about hope. Why? Simply because he has risen. And by he, I mean Jesus. That's the story of Easter. That's the story. That's the hope that I want to hold on to today. That's the hope that I hope we hold on to as we begin to do life together in groups, as a church, on a Tuesday when no one's watching. But today I want to focus on some people during the resurrection, after it happened. It's found in Matthew 28. So if you want to jump on your phone or you can follow along on the screen, we're going to spend primarily today in Matthew 28, verses 1 through 10. And this scripture is found, this story is found in all four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The cool thing about that is it's just four different personalities, four different educations, and four different views of what happened. So you're going to see different personality in each book because they're just like us, we're wired a certain way. In this specific one, it talks about early on in verse 1 and 2, it talks about the Marys, right? Mary and Mary Magdalene. But I want you to know something. In this story, after the resurrection, at this time in where we're at, Jesus had been buried in a tomb by the Romans, right? He'd been crucified on Good Friday, and now it's Sunday morning, and his body had been buried inside this tomb, and these women knew that Jesus did not have a proper burial. So they wanted to go and do two things. They wanted to mourn, just like we do when we go to a funeral, and they wanted to make sure he had a proper burial. So they were trying to figure out how are we going to get this stone off this tomb. But before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about these Marys. So the Marys that we hear about is Jesus' mother is there. Mary Magdalene is there, who's one of Jesus' closest followers. She was saved by Jesus. She had a huge curse in her life, full of demons. She had a horrible life, and Jesus was able to restore her earlier in Scripture and changed her life forever. And because of that, she gave her whole being to him. So she was very loyal to Jesus. And there was another Mary there as well that they don't talk about in Matthew, and that's his aunt. But here's why it's so cool about these Marys, and that's what I want to talk about, is that they were doing life together in a group. You see, in Jesus' ministry, for those 3 years that he did ministry that we read about in the Gospels, you hear a lot about all the disciples, right? The band, Peter, Mark, all those guys, the big names. But you don't hear a lot about these women who were behind the scenes doing a lot of work to provide the resources that they needed to be able to do what they did. So here they are mourning, and in Mark and Luke it talks about how they wanted to show up and give Jesus a proper burial because they just believed he deserved that as their son, as their nephew, as their savior, as someone they trusted and they followed for 3 years. They just wanted to be there near Jesus to pour out their sorrow and begin to find peace in a season of hopelessness. But something crazy happened. And we're going to read it in here in a second. But instead of finding peace, here's what they found. An earthquake. Not very peaceful. An angel. I would have ran and screamed the whole way. Guards who were guarding the tomb passed out of fear because there's this angel. And then the big one. Jesus' body was gone. Why? Because he rose. So instead of finding peace, they are now in a sense of shock. Their hopelessness now turns to curiosity. Like, what is happening? So let's read what it says in Matthew 1, verses 28. But first, let me say this. The God who remained silent, apparently, for the weekend, had the last word. I want you to think about that. A God that seems silent, really, at the end of the day, was in the midst of carrying out the last word. And we'll talk about that power a little bit later. But let's read Matthew 28, verses 1 through 10. So here's what it says. I'm going to read out the NLT. Behind me will be the same, so you guys can follow along or jump on your phones. Early on Sunday morning, as the new day was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went out to visit the tomb. Suddenly, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, rolled aside the stone, and sat on it. There's some humor for you. See, God has humor. That's hilarious. I'm going to show you I can roll this thing, and I'm going to sit on it and talk to you. I would have ran so fast. His face shone like lightning, and his clothing was as white as snow. The guards shook with fear when they saw him, and they fell into a dead faint. Verse 5. Then the angel spoke to the woman, "Don't be afraid." Don't be hopeless. Stick with me. The angel goes on to say, "I know you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified." It happened. What you saw, because those women were there at the crucifixion, at his feet, in tears. They saw him tortured. Tortured. So what they saw, he was crucified. Verse 6, he isn't here. Here's the famous, most powerful 3 words you'll ever read. He is risen. He is risen from the dead, and he is going ahead of you. I love that. He is going ahead of you. Same as is true in our lives. He has already gone ahead of us. You will see to Galilee. You will see him there. Remember what I have told you. That's key, right? Because they're in complete shock right now. So the angel's like, "Hey, I know this is all crazy. We've had an earthquake. You've seen some Roman soldiers faint. I'm sitting here hanging out on a rock with my hand on my chin, just hanging out. Hey, guess what? Jesus is risen. It's true. All those prophecies, all those words he told you, it's true." Then the women ran quickly. This is verse 8. From the tomb. They were very frightened, but also filled with great joy. I love that. Find joy in the journey. They were filled with great joy. And they rushed to give the disciples the angel's message. And as they went, so before they even got to where they were told to go, in John it goes into more detail about what happened next, but we're going to stick to Matthew for now. It says, verse 9, and as they went, Jesus met them and greeted them. So just days prior, these women saw a literally broken down human. Skin, unrecognizable, beaten, hung from a cross. To this day, the worst way to be murdered, to be tortured. So much so that it was outlawed afterward, later on, and it's still done today. People still are crucified on crosses today. Because if you want someone to pay, that's what you do. And Jesus went through it. So verse 10, go back to verse 9. And they went, Jesus met them and greeted them, and they ran to him, grasped his feet, and worshiped him. Now I love this because when you read about it, you hear that these women had to grab onto his feet because they weren't believing what they saw. They were thinking they were seeing another angel. Like, this can't be Jesus. So they literally had to grab on to realize, no, this is the real deal. And then they worshiped him. A season of hopelessness just turned into a season of hope. Verse 10, then Jesus said to them, "Don't be afraid." There it is again. Don't be afraid. Go tell my brothers to leave for Galilee, and they will see me there. And his brothers, what he meant by that was his disciples, the band. I refer to as he's going to get the band back together. So like the fellas that walked with him for 3 years and were discipled and were coached on what it meant to be a follower of Jesus, and they were able to see miracles happen. They were able to perform amazing miracles. And then they were able to watch God embodied in the flesh walk with them. They are the greatest coach of all time. So let's back up really quick and go back to verse 5. Do not be afraid. I love that because you see, remember what I said about earlier. In a time of hopelessness, we begin to search for something, right? Because we want to feel that hopelessness that we have in our heart. These women, guess what they searched out? Jesus. They were loyal from the beginning to the end. That's powerful. And then in verse 6, we all know he is risen, how powerful that is. Let's break down the word risen. Take off the "in." What do you have? Rise. Rise up. That's what we want to do as a church. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. And then another part of verse 6 that I love is just as he said. How many times has someone told you something, promised you something, and they haven't followed through? and all of us are guilty of it, and all of us probably don't trust as much as we used to as a little kid because we've been broken promise after broken promise, hurt after hurt. But Jesus is all about just as he said. All the prophecies in the Old Testament, all the words that he talked to the disciples about in those 3 years about, hey, they didn't catch it in the time, but he would try to warn them, it's coming, my death is coming. But 3 days, the temple will be raised back up again. Verse 7, I already alluded to it. He is going ahead of you. He was going ahead of them. He's gone ahead of us. We were born into freedom. We were born into salvation in a sense of the debt has already been paid. That is exciting. See? They heard me. Thank you, Amanda. That was like perfect. I think she saw the signal. I did that. You guys didn't catch it. See? Verse 8, frightened. Anyone ever been filled with fear before? Petrified of something? These women, though, fear is real. Fear we're going to experience in our lives. But you know what's awesome? You can still be fearful, but be filled with joy. Because Jesus was. Remember what I talked about, if you were here last week, I talked about Jesus praying in the garden? He was full of fear. But he knew he had a calling to live out, and he was going to do it. That's joy, because he's finding joy in the journey, just like we have the opportunity to do. Verse 9, Jesus met them. Now, I love that because it's a reference back to verse 6. Remember what I said about just as he said? He didn't leave them hanging. He actually met them before he said he was going to. My wife always says, mean what you say and say what you mean. Because I am at times terrible. Jesus did that. He meant what he said, and he said what he meant. So here's the cool part. When you get to verse 9, the Marys and all the women that were there, because it wasn't just the Marys, there were more women there present because, again, they operated not in isolation. They operated in groups. They operated together. They took hold of him out of disbelief. When was the last time you took hold of Jesus in your life? When you were facing a time of hopelessness. When it made the least sense. Because taking hold of Jesus takes faith, and it's hard. And then one of my favorite parts of these is verse 10, where he refers to the disciples, the band, the fellows, as my brothers. Why is that so powerful? Because let's remember something. Jesus recruited this team. He went out and recruited these guys, literally. No different than a college coach going out and recruiting his players for his teams. He's looking very, very specific attributes in these men that he knows he can utilize in the mission of doing life together to impact the kingdom. So he recruited these guys years ago from all different worlds, not Bible majors. He actually avoided those guys. But who were the ones that scattered when things got hopeless? When Jesus was arrested by Rome, what happened? Judas committed suicide. Peter, the one that always bragged about being the best, denied even knowing him. Imagine your best friend, your protege, denying who you, even knowing you. How hurtful, how sad that is. And then the rest of them scattered. They all scattered on their own. They went into isolation. But what can we learn from these from Jesus? He still refers to them as my brothers. That's a term of endearment. You see, Jesus was still full of hope towards a group who completely turned their back on him. And that's Jesus in a nutshell, right? Because at the end of the day, we've all turned our back on Jesus at some point in our lives. Me, more than once. But Jesus is still standing there calling me brother, going before me, meeting me where I am, because he is full of hope and he wants that hope to spread. Because at the end of the day, the story of Easter is all about hope. That cross in our Easter graphic is all about freedom and victory. And that's what we want Blue Bridge to be a place of hope, a place of victory. A hope that evil can overcome good. Because we all see the news every single day that evil is real. Everywhere in the world. The hope that people can change. And when people change, neighborhoods, communities, workplaces, schools, families can change. You want change? Turn to Jesus. Fall down on your hands and knees and grab onto his feet. So my question for us today, for you today, is simply this, and I want you to know this before I say this, is that we, because of the cross, because of the resurrection, because of the power that Jesus showed that day, we are now overcomers because of Jesus. And whatever you're fill in the blank, whatever you need to overcome, the power is within your grasp. Because later on, I'll read a verse to you guys where it talks about how Jesus conquered it all. It's conquered. You have what's in you already to conquer whatever you need to overcome. It's in you. It's real. It's called the Holy Spirit. Because at Blue Bridge, we want to be about building bridges and not walls. I believe in the moment when the arrest happened, and I don't blame the disciples. I would have done the exact same thing. After he was arrested, they began to build walls in their lives, and they scattered. And this group of women, because of their faith in Jesus and their faith in the prophecy and their belief in who he really was, they built bridges with one another, and they held on. So my question for us today is, will you begin to rise in your life, for your family, for your workplace, for your neighborhood? Will you overcome? Whatever you're struggling with, scared of, addicted to, that's between you and God and your family. But just know this, there is hope to overcome because of the resurrection and the power that Easter brings. Not Bugs Bunny or Easter or the Easter Bunny. It's because of Jesus. So let me read to you John chapter 16, verses 32 through 33. We're going back in time. This is when Jesus is talking, and he's just trying to share hope because he knows what's coming. And here's what he had to say. And it's true for us just as much it was for them and the audience he was talking to then. It says this in John 16, verse 32 and 33, again, out of the NLT. You will be unshakable and assured, deeply at peace. In this godless world, you will continue to experience difficulties, but take heart. I've conquered the world. I bet you he screamed that when he said it. He's conquered the world. He's conquered whatever you already need to overcome in your life. In my life, I have things I have to overcome. Holy smokes. You want me to list them? No? Okay, I won't. Cool. Let me off the hook. So if we go back to verse 6 where it talks about, it says, just as he said, the angel's referring to Jesus, just as Jesus said, that promise. Say what you mean what you say. It's conquered. You have it in you to overcome whatever it is. So I ask you today, will you begin to search for him? Will you begin to build bridges and not walls in your life? Will you begin to find joy in the journey? It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. But that cross equals joy and so many other words. And will you choice yourself, out of whatever you choiced yourself into? Because you have that power, because you have it in you. It was put in you when you were created by him. My daughter, who's 3 months away from being here, already has it in her. And she's not even physically here. She's in my wife's stomach. This might get awkward. I'll just stop. Someone's got to give me the signal, or the kid's got to say something. Someone, do this. Danger, Ed Robinson. Back on track. There you go. Thank you. So here's what, the plain and simple, here it is. He is ready to greet you today. No matter where you're at in your journey, he's ready to greet you. Because there is no judgment. There's only joy. There's only love. There's only victory waiting. He's gone before you. He's gone before me. So really quick, not really quick, it's a lame transition because I'm trying to find my spot. There's a word of advice. Jesus' words on the cross was simply this: it is finished. It is finished. But we aren't. The victory's been given to us. It is finished. But we still have work to do. There are too many people in this world that are broken and feeling hopeless right now. And they need hope. That's where we come in. That's our job. That's our duty. That's our privilege. We get to spread the kingdom. We get to spread the good news. So I ask you today, will we begin as a church to build bridges or walls? And here's my challenge for us today is here's how we're going to rise up and finish that Blue Bridge. We're going to begin to do life together. And if the worship team wants to come up, you guys can head up here. Because we're going to sing some more songs here in a second. And we're going to do some really cool things as we celebrate the greatest day on the calendar. We are going to begin to do life together in groups, in twos. Because we believe that's where change happens. Change happens together, not in isolation. The disciples came around. When the band got reunited, go read the book of Acts. You want to talk about people on a mission. You want to talk about people who changed communities and families and the world. That's the book of Acts. That's the band getting back together and saying, we're going to finish what was started. And we at Blue Bridge have that same opportunity. The other thing I want to talk about today, so when we do talk about groups, you saw the video, you heard a man talk about it. We're going to have people represented at the table right outside these doors so you can't run away. We're going to grab you, and we're going to make you sign up. No, I'm joking. So don't sneak out that back door. The other thing I want to talk about today is Together Sunday. At the end of this month, the last Sunday in April, we're going to have an awesome day planned for us as a church to do a handful of things. Baptisms. You heard about Jesus being baptized. You read about baptisms in the book of Acts. Thousands of people being baptized. You've heard about us talk about baptisms before. You've probably seen videos or pictures. Baptism is simply an outward expression of what God has done in your life inside. And it just gives you the opportunity to declare it in front of your friends and your family that God has changed my life and I am committed to following him for the rest of my life. We're going to do that at the end of the month here Together Sunday. We're also going to have what you'd call baby dedications. So if you have a young child that has never been dedicated before, again, there's nothing magical about that moment. But what's magical about it is that you as a parent, just like baptism, are now going to declare to your church, to your family, to your friends, that we as parents are committed to pointing our lives and our kids' lives to Jesus. And you are saying to your church, please help me. Please help me with Vail. Holy smokes. Meltdown in Target yesterday. I asked someone if they wanted a 2-year-old. They said no. Whew. That's what baby dedications are so powerful. Because, again, it's doing life together. Again, we're going to sing some songs that day. And then the cool part is when we're done, it's going to be a shorter day. We're going to head outside because it's going to be like 75 and no wind. I promise you. I promise you, or I'll grow my hair out. And we're going to have a picnic. We're going to have a barbecue. We're going to do life together. Because this is great. But it doesn't always have to be this way, right? This is the most overrated thing when it comes to leadership. Jesus lived it. He talked it, but he lived it more. That's what we're going to do out there. We're going to do life together. And then what's cool is the carousel, which we're going to honor at the end of service today, the staff, for how generous they are to us here. And starting next week, every week, our kids are going to get free carousel rides. Every week. That's awesome, you guys. That's not just something that they just do for people. That's very exciting. And guess what? You know why I'm excited? Because I get to ride it with my daughter. Ha. I'll beat you there. Another thing that I wasn't going to talk about, but I'm going to share it today because I just feel like we're in a season of where we can, is Team Thursday. So we're going to do something at the end of April. It's the last Thursday of the month. It's called April 26th. And this week, people are going to get an invite about it. But I want to invite everybody to do it. Because what we're going to do that night is we're going to have a night of just leadership development. And a night of vision. A night for me to share with you my heart for the future of what Blue Bridge is going to go. And I want to have a team there because it's not going to take just me. It's going to take a team. It's going to take a group of people who believe in a movement. I don't want to be a part of a church. I want to build a movement. That's what Jesus built, a movement. So that night, we're going to get together and we're going to sing some songs. We're going to go through some leadership stuff, and we're going to dream together. And I would love if everybody came because I believe everybody has a place on the team. You all have a gift. You all have a role. And we'll talk more about that later to remind you. But today, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take communion. And under your chairs, there's one of these cool to-go communion cups. See how trendy we've gotten? Right? And the top part is a piece of a cracker. And the bottom part, there's 2 labels, is juice. And here's why we're doing this today. Because we want to take a moment as we sing a song. Our awesome band's going to play a song for us. And during that song, you can just sit there quietly by yourself with your eyes closed. You can, as a family, pray together, or you can, whatever you want to do. But the cracker stands for the bread. If you think of the Last Supper, it's Jesus' body. The juice, Jesus' blood. So when we take communion, you're simply recognizing and celebrating the sacrifice that Jesus did for all of us. And all of them, and everyone driving down 395 right now and beyond. That's why communion is so powerful. The second thing I want to challenge you today to do at some point, because we're going to sing a few songs, and I'm going to give you guys a chance to worship and pray. But while you're doing that, think about this Connect card. It may seem silly that we ask you every single week, but I promise you, if you fill this out, I will find a way this week to connect with you, or someone will from our staff, and talk to you about what you put on this card. Not to judge, not to gossip, but to say, hey, let's do life together. So what I would challenge and love for you to do today on this Connect card is simply respond. I had you write overcome earlier. Maybe you didn't. You still have a chance to. But begin to think about, what do you need to overcome in your life? Is it a struggling marriage? Is it finances? Is it pain from an injury? Is it insecurity? Is there a fear that you just can't get by? Write it on here. I will overcome my insecurity of fill in the blank. I will overcome, because when you write it, you put it out there, and it's real. And I want to help you walk that journey. I want to help you find joy in that journey. And then, or you could write on there as well, I'm in, which means I'm coming to Team Thursday, where we're going to cast vision and dream together. You can just write the words, I'm in. Talked about groups info table already. And if you're a first-time guest, don't feel pressured to do all this stuff we're talking about, but we would love your information just to be able to connect with you. We'd love to send you a gift card in the mail. See how we can support you and connect better. Or the big one, maybe you're here today and you're like, man, it's time for me to just say yes to Jesus again. And I don't need to know what your whole story is, but I would love for you to write on here or check the box where I'm following Christ. Just write the word yes, and I will call you. I will reach out to you and say, I will celebrate that choice with you. I'm going to close with this. 3 simple sentences. You are loved, you are forgiven, and you are empowered. It's in you to overcome. So let's overcome it together.